Today we're going to cover a second day on the Pythagorean Theorem. So we're still applying it to determine unknown side lengths in right triangles. And we'll also be doing some application-based problems. So from the previous lesson, you don't need to write this down again. This is just a reminder that the Pythagorean Theorem states that in a right triangle, the sum of the squares of the lengths of the legs is equal to the square of the length of the hypotenuse. Remember that the hypotenuse is always the longest side opposite the right angle, and the legs are the two sides that make up the right angle. So this is a review from the previous lesson. We're given side lengths A and B, and we need to find the hypotenuse, side C. So I'm going to write the theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Again, it doesn't matter which side you label A or B. So we have 9 squared plus 8 squared equals c squared. 9 squared is 81, 8 squared is 64. '81 plus 64 is 145, and that equals c squared. And then remember, this is not the length of the hypotenuse. We need to square root both sides first. And when you square root 145, it's not a perfect square, so if we write our answer as a decimal, rounded to the nearest tenth, it's 12.0 meters. And there are several decimal places after the 0, but the second decimal place is a 4, so that would not round the 0 up to a 1, so we keep it 12.0. Now we're going to look at some cases, and this is where the lesson is different from previous, where we know the hypotenuse, but it's either side length A or B that we don't know. So again, I'm going to write the theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. I'm going to label the 12 side A and the unknown side B. Side 15 inches is the hypotenuse. Again, it's opposite the right angle. So now when we substitute in, we have 12 squared plus x squared, and actually I'll just put b squared, equals 15 squared. So 144 plus b squared equals 225. 15 times 15 is 225. And now instead of adding like we were in the previous lesson, we're going to subtract 144 to the other side, because you have to get the b squared alone before you can square root. So 225 minus 144 is 81. And now when we square root both sides, we get that b equals 9 inches. So the unknown side length here is one of the legs, and it's 9 inches. Also, you can kind of verify that your answer makes sense. This answer should make sense to you because it's smaller than 15. You always make sure that your answer is less than 15 or less than the longer side. And now we're just going to look at some examples where we haven't drawn the triangle. I just list A, B, and C, and you need to find the unknown. So in this case, in the instructions, it says that C is the measure of the hypotenuse. So if C is the hypotenuse, then you know that A and B are the legs. So for example 3, if we have a squared plus b squared equals c squared, that's 18 squared plus 80 squared equals c squared. 18 squared is 324. 80 squared is 6,400. And that equals c squared. When you add them together, it's 6724. And then we square root both sides, so the square root is 82. So C equals 82. We don't have units here, so it would just be 82 units. Now in example 4, remember that the C is the hypotenuse, so now we don't know one of the lengths of the legs. So it's going to be a squared plus b squared equals c squared again. We don't know a squared, 48 is b and 57 is c. So that's a squared plus 48 squared is 2,304. 57 squared is 3,249. And then we have to subtract 2304 from both sides. That gives us a squared equals 3249 minus 2304 is 945. And then we square root both sides to get the squared and the square root to cancel out to just give us side length A. And this is a decimal, so it's 30.7 when you round to the nearest tenth. So now we've looked at some examples where we didn't know one of the lengths of the legs, and what you have to remember here is that there ends up being subtraction in that problem rather than addition, but most of the solving is still the same. In class, we'll work on worksheet 9.1b.